morning. As you heard, my name is Prashant, and I've got my colleagues Arpit and Rahul presenting today together. And we're really happy to be at Cypher today, here today. This is the first time we as MathWorks are here, and we're talking to you about a topic that is, I think, really important and impacts all of us. Climate change is a reality. We are seeing the effects of it all around us every day. And it is imperative that all of us, that we make a change and that we accelerate the speed of change, and also that we are empowered to make the right decisions when we're navigating our way out of this situation. What can we do? And what are we supposed to do, and how do we do it? That's what we're going to talk about. And especially from the context of a technology platform of how we can enable all of us to work together to get out of this situation. Making the change is not just up to climate scientists working away on their own. It is for all of us to work as engineers, scientists, business leaders, practitioners, take the right decisions and make our way out of this. And I'll hand it over to Arpit to talk to us a bit more about what we've got to help all of us move our decision-making so that we can ensure that we are in a better place and give our children, our next generations, a better future. With that, I'll hand it over to Arpit to talk a bit about the challenges that we are facing, and then Rahul will go through a couple of technology solutions that we have at play, and I'll come back at the end to wrap it all up. Arpit.
Thank you, Prashant. Hello? Hello? Okay. Thank you, Prashant. Just a quick disclaimer. I flew from New York just a couple of days back, and I'm heavily jet-lagged. So while physically I'm here, my body clock is somewhere in Western Europe. So if I say something sensible, it's me. If I say nonsense, it's my body clock in Western Europe, right? So we are going to spend about 30 minutes on this topic, which focuses on climate risk and ESG. And the natural logical question when we're spending this much time is, should we really care about this topic? And if so, why, right? So let's take the first principles approach to answer this question. And the evidence of this answer will be taken from the World Economic Forum Annual Outlook Report that came out last year. This report is based on the survey with 1,000+ global risk leaders and experts. And out of those experts, 85% are really concerned about the long-term economic outlook of the world. The question is what they're really concerned about. This next schematic aims to answer that. You can see that the green ones are the environmental risk, and the red ones are the societal risk, or the social risk in short. And 8 out of 10 top risks that these leaders are concerned about are ESG related. So that kind of answers the question that this topic is important, right? Now this is an average picture for next 10 years. Let's see what exactly is the trend in the short term, which is 0 to 2 years, in the midterm, which is 2 to 5 years, and in the long term, which is 5 to 10 years. If you see the left diagram, you'll see it's just 2 environmental risks, whereas there are 4 societal risks. So in the short run, societal risk is more dominant, but in the long term, that gets swapped. The environmental risk is really, really concerning. Now, if you see, there's one point worthy to note here, which is that the climate action failure is the most concerning thing. And if that's the most concerning thing, the question is, what are we doing about that to mitigate the climate action failure? And this schematic aims to answer that. More than 75% people, more than 75% of the organizations around the world are not yet prepared. They either have nothing or they're in the very early stages. And just 1/4 of the organizations are doing something here. So while that's concerning, but there's some optimism still there. But let's see what the global actors are doing in the space, and we'll start with the governments. So the governments across a few countries are taking actions, and they have aligned their reporting mandates with TCFD. But still there's a big jurisdictional disparity, as you would see in this diagram. So the green shaded area represents something where the governments have taken action and aligned their mandates with TCFD. The yellow section is where there's some work going on, but they're not yet there. and the red is the part where nothing has started, and then there's gray as well. So the ideal state is all green, and we are far off that green, so there's a lot of work to be done by the governments. It's not just the governments who are playing a role here. The regulators are proactively doing their work as well, and there are lots of initiatives going on, especially in the European region. ECB is doing a lot of work, Bank of England is doing a lot of work, other central banks in Europe are doing a lot of work as well. And in general, EU region is considered to be the global leader. And other jurisdictions across the globe are following them. And yes, including the US as well. The good thing is there's collaboration happening here as well. So NGFS, which is a consortium of 120 central banks and supervisors, is working actively and collaborating to produce some meaningful work which is used by many all across the globe. The next set of actors are the industry bodies, and they are working pretty hard as well to make sure that they can streamline the overall ESG disclosures in a coherent manner. There's a lot of stuff going on to converge to the single ISSB standards, and 3 months back, ISSB rolled out 2 of their sustainability and climate disclosures, which are expected to streamline the overall global disclosures really well, and may potentially address the issue that's there with greenwashing in the investor space. Now, the overall spectrum of ESG and climate risk is pretty wide. But there are few topics that we will take a sneak peek at in this slide, which are making the news headlines in the global news media. So, a lot of market actors are getting deja vu of Great Recession, and they think that climate risk can actually cause another recession all around the world. But this is not just a gut feeling. It's actually backed by the numbers and the stats. And Bank of England actually kind of saw that the mortgage industry could be impacted by almost 45% if a climate crisis happens. And we might think naturally that it's the insurers who will be hit the most, but that's not true. The lenders will be actually hit more than the insurers. So this is a cause of concern for the financial services industry, and the industry is working on building analytical models to see as to what the impact of climate change will be on their business and how they can actually mitigate that. But as soon as you build the models, you actually face another risk, and that's called model risk. The biggest concern for the model risk is the black box nature, and that's what a lot of risk managers around the globe are concerned about when it comes to the climate models. Moving to the ESG, the regulators are becoming more and more strict on the ESG disclosures, but most of them are not yet there. They have to do a lot of work to actually get to the level where the regulators want them to be. And if they don't do the right work, they'll be penalized heavily. So there's a reputation risk, there's a capital risk. And this example is of a Brazilian company where the regulator actually penalized the company on bad disclosures with $55 million, which is huge. That means something needs to be done which incentivizes the top management to take right actions. And in lieu of that, what's happening is a lot of executive performance and their compensation is now being tied to the ESG metrics so that they take the right actions. And before I click the next thing, I'll say something. The next news headline should be a matter of pride for all of us in India, because SEBI is the first major regulator to launch the ESG disclosure guideline that needs to be audited for the top 150 firms in India. Now, I said earlier that Europe is leading the charge, but that's not true. As a de facto standard, SEBI, in fact, has also prescribed a guideline for the credit rating agencies on ESG, which is again the first one in the world. So we in India are actually leading the charge in some sense as well globally. And if you actually put all this clutter of headlines in an unsupervised machine learning model and ask it to generate a few themes, it will generate most likely 3 themes which represent the industry demand. The first one is there's a need for robust climate-related stress testing for mortgages. The second one will be a strong need for model risk and governance standards for climate models. And the last one will be the need for comprehensive analysis of ESG disclosures. So, as with anything else, there's a pivotal role for the analytics and technology to play here. So if we just put those three needs on the left side, there are some technology requirements that can actually cater to these business needs. So we need to act fast. And for that, you have to have low-code and no-code apps and the Quant and AI tools that you can actually use for quick prototyping and faster development. Also, climate risk and ESG is not a siloed thing. It's an enterprise affair. So there's a lot of collaboration that's needed, and you have to have a good collaborative platform for that. You have to have a regulatory solution that can help you align your climate models with the regulations. And lastly, you have to have a platform that just not builds a model, but also helps you to deploy, scale, and monitor the models effectively. And that is actually a transition to the next section, which Rahul will cover, and talk about what we are doing with at MathWorks on these areas.
So let's move on to the next section. So as Arpit mentioned, there are three key industry demands that typically we look at. So let's look at each of those in detail in that particular order. So let's start with credit stress testing for mortgages, right? Now, a few years ago, Bank of England, they released a document called CBES, which stands for Climate Biennial Exploratory Scenario. Now, what that document does, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the excerpts. So the document highlights how banks can be resilient across and how they can be resilient across these different climate risks. Now, a couple of excerpts from the document, specifically for mortgages, they highlighted two key risks, as Arpit mentioned, transition and physical risk. And for transition risk specifically, they highlighted something called EPC rating, which basically stands for Energy Performance Certificate, or in other words, how efficient multiple properties are in terms of utilizing energy. Similarly, when it came to physical risk, they highlighted a couple of things, specifically on flood risk, and how these physical risks can rather impact the banks as well as the mortgages that they give out to multiple institutions as well as individuals. Now, one of the things I do want to focus on, which is a key takeaway here, is this is basically the energy transition matrix that in terms of cost, it highlights how from a low energy factor to a high energy factor, how much it would cost to transition. For instance, it says from a low energy standard of G to, let's say, A, it costs about 47,000 pounds. And using this entire concept, we developed our tool, which basically takes into account these EPC ratings so that you can visualize them. You also have the ability to play around with flood risk, which we are developing. And most importantly, it helps you analyze these climate policies and also convert those to a form of where you can calculate the loan to value, which is a key metric for credit risk. Now, these are some of the high-level metrics that the app covers. So the most important one here is the loan to value, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're analyzing credit risk, that becomes a really key metric. A couple of other things as well. The tool talks about how you can calculate and compute probability of default, and a bunch of other things which highlights how climate risk can impact credit risk on the whole. So now what we did when we started having conversations about this with multiple customers, we spoke to a top French mortgage insurer who was interested in implementing this and in, for the lack of a better word, maybe Frenchify the entire concept. So what we did, we took the Bank of England concept and we converted that using an API to geolocalize these French properties and implement the concept on a French locality. So one of the things I want to mention here, take a look at some of the key metrics which I've highlighted, EPC ratings, property value, mortgage, and LTV. And the NGFS scenario down there has two key metrics. There's an orderly and a disorderly scenario. In the orderly scenario, you would see the EPC transition column there, transitioning gradually from a low energy efficiency rating to a high energy efficiency rating. Similarly, when you look at the disorderly scenario, which we're playing around at the bottom right over there, it highlights how these energy transitions happen, not so much in an orderly scenario, and not so much at the same pace either. However, eventually you will be going from a low EPC rating to a high EPC rating. And at the end of the day, what it does, it also impacts the property value, the mortgage, and the LTV, as I mentioned. And all of them are mapped on the column there in the last three columns. So, long story short, what we've done, we've taken transition risk, climate risk, and looked at how it would compute multiple metrics of credit risk using this app. So let's move on to the second section where we talk about model risk and governance, right? Now, we've implemented that specifically for climate risk, but just for the sake of completeness, let me give a high-level idea of model risk management in general, right? Now, a lot of you working in modeling and simulation as well as software development, you've probably come across this multiple times where you've seen the need for an automated model lifecycle management tool. And typically what we see is 4 key factors where we talk about development and validation, review and approval, usage and monitoring, and finally change and initiation. And each of these lifecycle pies, so to speak, have their own challenges as well, right? For instance, in the development case, we use, for AI specifically, challenger models, where we can compare multiple models together to come at the, or arrive at the best possible solution. And there's a strong need for that because at the end of the day, the data that you're using does not have to be attributed to a specific algorithm. Similarly, you need a centralized hub where you can track all of these models. And all of these eventually would reduce the cost and time to market and compliance if implemented perfectly. In the review process, the key metric is audit compliance and how multiple institutions and auditors can ensure that they are compliant with multiple regulatory frameworks. Moving on, as you're increasing these models as well, usage and monitoring of these models becomes very important. And in the case where you have multiple models, you would also need frequent monitoring to keep up with a lot of these frameworks that eventually evolve over a period of time. Some of them are as recent as Arpit mentioned in terms of ISSB rather. So these are things that we need to keep in mind when you're looking at the model lifecycle on the whole. And finally, as you're going through these entire changes, the number of models tend to increase over a period of time, and that becomes another challenge to capture and monitor over the entire life cycle of the model itself. Now, for a lot of you working in this space, as well as for software development as well, you've probably seen some sort of framework already being used, right? And I think a lot of you would recognize this. Some people call it model DevOps. If it's only modeling, you would call it model ops, or ML ops when modeling is attributed specifically to machine learning models. But the core idea here practically remains the same, right? You're going all the way from development, building, testing, monitoring, and then eventually reporting the entire model. And the infinity symbol that you have there typically highlights how you would interact between development and operations, and also the fact that it could be highly iterative in nature as well. And these are the key things that we've kept in mind for our solutions, which we call MathWorks Modelscape, which is our key solution for model risk management at MathWorks. And again, the core idea remains the same. You're going all the way from development to monitoring. In each and every point, we have multiple sections and products which would help you increase your product lifecycle time, or rather reduce your product lifecycle time, sorry. And then eventually, there is a Modelscape governance tool, which is an all-encompassing tool that ensures you're taking care of the entire model structure, and it's a one-stop shop to understand model lineage as well as traceability across these models. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through this entirely, but the idea is in the development platform, as Arpit mentioned, we have a low-code, no-code environment, And it's also easily interoperable with multiple other tools. Python being the most popular one, there's high interoperability there, but there's also automated code generation, auto code generation on its own, and finally automated report generation as well. All of this comes directly from the app, similar to the creative interactive app that I mentioned earlier during the credit stress testing case. We go then to validate, where you can do independent validation and as well as parallel validation if necessary. There are unit test tools as well. There are deployment tools, as I mentioned. There are auto code generation techniques where you can directly convert these to C code to put it into production. There are monitoring tools, as I mentioned, to evaluate and over a period of time change these models and keep a track of it. And finally, model governance, as I mentioned. So this is just a quick look of model governance, which we've specifically employed for climate stress testing. So one of the things I want to focus on here is this is basically an example of an entire exhaustive list of the climate models that we have or you would have when you implement it. And as you go through, I want to mention that all of these models are actually interconnected and they're interdependent on each other. And what we have is a model dependency platform as well, where you can see the lineage of these models, which models depend on the which other models. And also, as I mentioned, since it's multi-platform, you can look at the information of each of these models by simply going through these blocks and then looking at each and every data point from this model. This is an example of one of them. Now you have name, you have description, multiple other tools, including audit trails, findings, as well as a version control setup as well for the cross-platform validation as well as methods. So one thing we did using this entire model risk and modelscape concept, we implemented this at HSBC, which, as most of you know, a lot of banks these days are moving towards an agile framework as opposed to a waterfall model, primarily because of the amount of time it takes for approvals in the waterfall model as well. So what we did, we worked with HSBC using our solutions to make it faster, cheaper, and better. All right, so now we've talked a lot about model risk, climate risk, etc., right? But at the end of the day, we are at an AI conference, we're at Cypher. So how does AI come into all of this? And how are we utilizing our artificial intelligence networks as well as workflows and integrating that with ESG? So to talk more about that, I'll hand it back to Arpit to take you through the rest of the section.
Thank you, Rahul. Hello. Yeah. Thanks, Rahul. So the next topic is AI-powered ESG analytics. But before I go into that, the question is, why would I need ESG analytics? Whether it's AI-powered or rule-based. The answer to that question is, if you see the global investors, the big investors who have trillions of dollars in assets, like BlackRock, who has $10 trillion in assets and so on and so forth, they have a big mandate to invest in these sustainable related investments, these sustainability investments. Now, in one segment, they actually develop in their local jurisdictions, but they also have to invest the money in the developing economies, India being one of them, right? But the challenge that they face is the lack of right kind of information that they need to make an informed decision, okay? So if they have to make an investment in a company in India based on the ESG mandates, they don't have a way to get the right level of information. And that's why there's a need for the right kind of analytics tool that provides a standardized set of analytics, and AI plays a pivotal role here. And I'll also talk about the large language models, that's the buzz of town, right? So, within the context of India, as I mentioned earlier, SEBI published a guideline which is called BRSR about 2 years back that mandates the top 1,000 firms in India which are publicly listed and top 1,000 based on market capitalization to do the reporting using this guidance, right? A bit more detail, this guidance is actually broken across 3 different sections, and the main objective here was to promote standardization so that there's a way to compare different firms on a standardized scale so that the investment decisioning can be made more informed. And that was the main reason SEBI actually launched this guideline. And with that said, though there's a lot of very rich information that lies in the BRSR filings, the problem is, just with that information alone, you cannot make very well-informed decisions. And for that, you need some cutting-edge analytics, right? And that's what our motivation was to build this AI-powered sustainability analytics app. So what this app is? So what we did, we actually took some of the key information across different segments from the BRSR, and this information includes the information about the products and services for the reporting firm, about the workers and safety for that firm, about the material business issues, and so on and so forth. But that's not it. We also took some of the information from the external sources to complement this filings information, so that now the investors can actually make an informed decision not based on what is coming out of BRSR, but more broadly. And that was fed into the app, and this is one of the screenshots of the app is. Now, each of these boxes that you see, 5 boxes under ESG metrics from BRSR and 3 under the other sources, each of them is a separate comprehensive module within the app. So there's a lot of deep analytics that goes in the app, and there's one module for each of them. We also implemented a couple of database and UI utilities, which I'll talk about in the next slide. So rather than talking about everything, I'll take a few examples, and I'll talk about these 4 modules that are shown on the slide right now. So the first one is the BRSR XBRL browser. The other is products and services analytics module. The third is the material business issues analytics module. And the last one is the news and social media analytics. Let's see them one by one. So the BRSR XBRL downloader and browser helps you download a lot of filings from a lot of companies, let's say 1,000 mandatory companies, in the click of a button. And once you download that, you may want to explore that data. The problem is, the data is either present in a PDF form, which is very difficult to kind of just analyze, or it is present in the XBRL format, which is again a coded format, and again it's very difficult to kind of analyze and read that data. And to address that limitation, we actually implemented this browser, where you can actually analyze all that data in a tabular format and export that as needed. The next one is the product and services analytics module. Now this module is important because you cannot compare big firms like Tata and Reliance, because they are actually, they span across so many different business verticals that that's not an apples to apples comparison. And that's why what we did was, we leveraged the NIC codes, which is the industry classification that the government of India has mandated. We took those NIC codes and we actually used those to perform the apples to apples comparison, not at the firm level, but at the product and services level. So now you can actually get a lot of information at that level. The next one is the material business analytics module, and this is extremely information rich, because here the company actually lists what are the key business issues they are facing, what are the risks they are exposed with based on those issues, and where the opportunity lies. And that's what is extremely important for the asset managers to invest their money. But there's a big problem here. The problem is that the terminology that they use in BRSR filing is not standardized. So SEBI did not give any guidance on what taxonomy you should use. For example, if you have a health and safety issue, somebody would list that as health and safety, somebody would list that as employee safety, somebody would list that as safety risk. So now, you don't have a way to kind of just standardize them and compare them. So what we did here was, to address this issue, we implemented a BERT model fine-tuned for ESG classification, which actually mapped all these bespoke taxonomy to the globally accepted SASB taxonomy. And now this is a game changer, because all the big investors around the globe, they are very well aware of the SASB taxonomy. So now if they have to make a comparison to make an informed decision, they can actually use this taxonomy and see how two firms compare. And lastly, the investors just don't want to rely on the information that is coming from the company. They want to analyze the news media. They want to analyze the social media like Twitter. And that's where we again implemented a BERT model, fine-tuned for finance sector, and do the sentiment analysis, again on the SASB taxonomy. So now you club all those information and helps you make an informed decision. And we are now incorporating the state-of-the-art large language models to do further analytics on that. Now, this is one single app, but it can be customized in different ways to deliver different values to a range of stakeholders. The examples of those being the regulators, like SEBI, or Securities Exchange Commission in the US, the asset managers, like BlackRock and Fidelity, the auditors, like the Big Fours, KPMG and Deloitte of the world, and the corporates that are actually making these filings. What's there in it for regulators? The regulators can actually use this for the oversight. They can see where the gaps are in the reporting companies, if there's a market manipulation they are doing, or is there a poor reporting, and they can actually issue the RFIs to the reporting firm. And they can also issue the sector reports identifying who are the leaders and who are the laggards. For the asset managers, they can analyze the ESG metrics in the company and the sector level, and they can use their own weighing scheme to create the ESG scores, which could be fed into their investment screening and asset allocation decisions. For the auditors, they can actually see where the anomalies and the red flags in the reports from the audit perspective, and we have automation utilities to actually automate the audit report generation. And the corporates can actually see how their peers are performing and what are the best practices insights they can actually take from the peers and implement in their BRSR. So, just a recap, we spoke about 3 different areas, but that's not all what we have at MathWorks. We have a big on climate risk and ESG, we have a lot more. So we have a different kind of climate scenario explorers. You can explore NGFS data, you can explore a lot of other databases. We have the tools and apps for the physical and transition risk modeling. We have the apps for portfolio alignment with respect to Paris Agreement goals. We have apps to actually do the ESG scoring and ESG-based investment analysis. We have the tools for weather derivatives modeling, which is used in parametric insurance. And then we also have apps to do some kind of capital modeling. And it's not about just building these analytical tools and models. You can actually very easily create some stunning web apps and deploy it and scale it across your enterprise. So this is a kind of platter of apps you can actually build at your own firm without needing a full stack engineer or a UI developer. Until now, we spoke about climate risk and ESG, but MathWorks is pretty broad on financial services. So we have we deal in different domains, including pricing, risk, asset management, and more, and different regulations, including the stress testing, capital modeling, model risk, and others. Our clients include the buy-side firms, the sell-side firms, the banks, insurers, and central banks. And on the functional side, we have tools and technologies for you to actually do big data analytics, computational modeling, AI and ML modeling, and production scaling. And all of these tools are meticulously tested, well-documented, technically supported, and they actually interoperate very well with the third-party solutions. And with that, I'll hand it over to Prashant.
Thank you, Arpit, and thank you all of you for listening in. So a bit about who we are as an organization. We are very broad. We already saw that from climate risk all the way to financial services, but more than that, our customers span practically every engineering, financial, and scientific institute or company, as well as academic institutes as well. So across aerospace, defense, automotive, biotech, pharma, semiconductors, MATLAB and Simulink are our core platforms. Those are the tools that everybody is using to develop the systems for the future. And today we wanted to talk a bit about AI, as well as the application of this in climate risk and in the financial services sector. Now, in the area of AI, it's not just us saying what we can bring to the table, but Gartner, for example, has recognized MathWorks as a leader for data science and machine learning platforms for 2 years in a row, specifically in the areas of completeness of vision and ability to execute on the vision. We are the leaders here. With that, finally, to wrap it up and bring it back together, Arpit gave you an overview of the key industry demands and the need for analytics and technology, and what those specific needs are in analytics and technology. And then our Rahul came in and talked a bit about the things that we bring to the table in this area. So what did we show you? We showed you a broad array of climate risk and ESG tools and solutions, which we've built. So these are apps that you can build, and we can customize these for usage. There's an integrated model lifecycle platform, and of course, more than the tools and the technology, there are also the people. We have worked with financial institutes globally, and we bring that know-how to the table for you to, that we can leverage for your applications as well in Quant, AI, climate, and many, many other areas. So with that, great innovation, start with a simple conversation, begin ours, come and talk to us. There are 3 of us over here. We have further members of the team up in front. We're going to be here the rest of today, as well as the next 2 days. I do realize the session started a bit early, so in case you came in late and you want us to run through this again, just come up and talk to us. Otherwise, you can just scan this QR code, and you'll get in touch with us, so in case you can't find us. All right, thank you very much, and thank you, Cypher, for this wonderful platform, and thank you, all of you, as well.
Q&A?
Have a great day.
Q&A? Should we do Q&A?
You want a question? Yeah? So we have an opportunity to take questions.
Any questions from anyone?
There's one over
I
there.
think I see a hand there, and here as well. So, yeah.
There's a mic coming, so.
Hi, I'm Avinash Samrit from Clean Harbors. We are an environmental services and hazardous waste management company. My question is kind of more philosophical. How do you glamorize ESG? And I'll give you a perspective for that, because you show some shiny videos and we all get zapped, and you attract talent, and now you show all these things which are so very important for our very existence. And also from an economy standpoint, investors won't come to you unless you have a decent enough ESG record. But still, I think it's hard to attract talent in this space. So any thoughts around that, anything that you would have done, I would love to hear.
Attracting. So how do you glamorize it, and how do you attract talent to work in this space?
Yeah.
I would think, so some of this becomes a necessity, and when you see the impact of the work that you're doing, right? And we talked about this, right? You're impacting climate change. You're impacting something that is important for everybody on this planet. I think that is the glamour of the role. That is the glamour of what you're doing. So we say, you say the bricklayer building the wall, but taking that step back and seeing the entire palace or cathedral or temple, mosque, whatever they're building, when they get that perspective, then that's when they see it. And I think that's the approach for essentially when you're working on ESG. It is very, very impactful work.
Yeah, so I think the glamour term is one thing, but let's forget about the investor's perspective. You're really facing the issues related to climate risk. And maybe we don't face it, our next generations will face it, right? And in India, we care so much for our children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren. If you're really concerned, we should act upon it, right? So while glamour is one thing which actually works towards investments and whatnot, which is where our apps work really well, but if you have to really make a change, people have to come together and make that change. Now to your second part of the question, which is around talent, ESG is a problem that cannot be solved with one specific type of talent. So there has to be collaboration, right? And the collaboration is happening. You see, I spoke about NGFS consortium. Central banks are coming together, climate scientists are coming together, Even climate philosophers are coming there, right? So the collaboration is the key, and it's not at the industry level. Even within the organization, people have to come together and kind of solve that problem of the talent. But yes, we do need more and more talent to address the requirements that, the issues that we are facing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent question. 2, 3 questions.
Thanks for the wonderful presentation. I represent Elsevier. Elsevier as an organization.
Can you jack up your voice a bit, please?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm audible now? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I represent the Elsevier organization. We have a booth, so we work with a lot of academics and government industries. So my question is specific to ESG. So when we talk about these models and apps, from carbon credit perspective, basically you talked about, okay, all the tens and trillions of dollars are being invested by big houses. But there is also, how will you basically encourage the people or the team using your apps or approaches to start investing into the ESG compliant systems or the processes, or it may be process, it may be a tech, it may be some newer ways of thinking, all these things.
Yep.
And how your solution actually plays that role into the whole ecosystem.
Got it, okay. So the apps and tools are just the enablers, right? They cannot do all the magic. The most important thing is not to show the glossy app and not to show the large language models working behind. So when I was speaking with one of the largest asset management company CEO in Mumbai 4 or 5 months back, in the boardroom I started with this pitch that, we should not think about the apps and tools. Let's think about where the real problem is. How do you actually kind of pitch the investment attractiveness to the right investors who don't care about technology? So the idea is you give people a sense as to why this is an area which will actually give you returns, but at the same time will also drive the change, right? So giving that perspective, giving that story, which actually kind of drives the monetary benefit, but also the change is extremely important. And then enabling them with the right set of technology is crucial.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's 2 more there.
Yeah, hi, this is Vinay this side. A very nice presentation. I have two-faced question here. So is it on, is your team only giving app or the data that is inside the app? If you're also giving the data that is inside the app, what is the frequency at which we get the data? And is it only focused in India or is it global? If it is global, again, at what level it is, industry or at a company level and so on?
Okay, so at this point, it's only BRSR data, so just India, right? So it's just the Indian firms. So when we are extracting the news and the social media analytics, it's only for the publicly traded firms in India. Now, can you expand it globally? Yes. In fact, in the US and in Europe, we are discussing with the regulators as to how we can take this thing that we built for the Indian economy for the US, right? And we're discussing with the United Nations as well how we can actually kind of work with them on it. So yes, it can be scaled to the global context. Right now it's India specific, and all the data that resides right now is from BRSRs. And when you ask about the frequency of update, there's nothing that we have implemented right now as a thumb rule kind of thing. It's based on how frequent you want to use it for, right? So if somebody is using for reporting purposes and doing analysis, they might want to just kind of see the data on a monthly basis. But an asset manager might want to see the data on a daily basis because the market volatility kind of can change the overall financial perspective and impact the ESG trade as well. So it depends as to who you're talking about, and that would drive the frequency.
Probably one
Do we
last.
have time for questions?
Do we have
or
one more?
One last question? Okay. I'd love to take as many questions as you want outside of this hall.
Hello.
Yeah.
Myself,
Yeah.
Akshay. Yeah. Very insightful presentation, I would say. I wanted to get into some technical things, right? For example, let's say you said about model monitoring. Can you hear me? Yeah. So can you hear me?
Come
yeah.
here, come here.
Wanted to get into some technical details. When you say model monitoring, I understand the importance of model monitoring, but my question is pretty specific. Like, what kind of key parameters you look into when it comes to model monitoring? Specifically, the models like a typical ML models. but I would like to get some details on the ESG specific model monitoring. Yeah, that is my question.
Yes, I think let's connect. It's quite a long answer. So
Maybe at the high level, maybe you can just say if you have time.
I can give a high level answer, very high level, and then we'll talk more. So there depends on what models you're looking at. If you're looking at AI models, the drift, the data and the performance drift is very critical to monitor. If you're looking at the market risk and trading models, you need to monitor as to how the volatility can impact the P&L and cause your trade to fail, right? If you're looking at some low frequency models, then maybe just monitoring the overall regime shifts and whatnot could be important. So it's not a single size answer, like a magic bullet kind of answer. It depends as to what is the context of your model and what is the type of your model. And I can actually kind of talk a lot more detailed as to what are the complexities and what the Fed regulators and the European regulators are talking about, not in the public domain. So, feel free to connect and we can talk more.
Thank you.
All right,
Perfect.
thanks, everyone.
So we are on time. Thank you so much, everyone. It was very lovely speaking with you all. As I said, if I said anything nonsensical, just blame it on my body clock. Thank you.